A US president, shouting and pointing his finger at a British Royal Guard? On a bleak November morning at Blackwood Castle, this moment, echoing through ancient stone walls, was far more than a mere protocol crisis. Donald Trump, emerging from a private meeting with the king, immediately fixed his gaze on Royal Guard Corporal Arthur Finch. Then, he leaned in and murmured to the black security officer on his protection detail, "It's time for the shot." And then he commanded, "Get that guard out of the frame." But Arthur stood his ground, unblinking. In that breathless silence, Arthur requested only 60 seconds. He didn't take a step back, nor did his voice tremble. In that moment, he wasn't speaking of his duty, but of his conviction. He cried out the honor behind his uniform, years of sacrifice, and unshakable loyalty. This wasn't just a stance, it was a challenge etched into history. If you want to discover the untold stories behind such true events, subscribe now and turn on notifications, because these stories aren't just watched, they're felt. It was the middle of November, a leaden sky stretched over England like a heavy, damp shroud. Every breath carried the cold, bleak air into the lungs, feeling the weight of centuries seeped into Blackwood Castle's ancient stones, chilling to the bone. It was as if every stone of the castle whispered bittersweet memories of the past. The ramparts of Blackwood Castle were like the deeply scarred body of an old warrior. In every crack, every crevice, hidden were the whispers of history, the vows of forgotten kings, mysterious legends, and the echoes of countless victories and defeats. The wind howled through the towers, as if carrying the laments of forgotten heroes, playing a mournful yet dignified melody in the air. As the first light of morning filtered into the castle courtyard, an unusual, even somewhat dense, activity prevailed over this historic place. A waiting silence had settled. The grand doors opened, not gently, but with a magnificent screech, like a theater curtain, metal grinding against metal, and from within emerged one of the world's most recognizable silhouettes, US President Donald Trump. On his face was his usual calculated, ironic, and at times overtly disdainful smile, defying the cameras and the merciless gaze of history. In his eyes, an unshakable belief that the world belonged to him could be read. His army of bodyguards followed him like shadows, each on alert, ready for any threat at any moment. Armored vehicles, snipers, stern-faced men in suits, mysterious figures communicating through whispers in their earpieces. A complete security shield, like a castle without walls. As Trump advanced with slow, deliberate steps, his gaze suddenly fixed on the figure standing rigidly in front of the castle, as if time itself had frozen. Royal Guard Corporal Arthur Finch. Arthur, in his brilliant red tunic, feathered black bearskin helmet, and polished boots, stood like a statue carved from steel. In the shadow of his helmet, his eyes carried the full seriousness of the world, the weight of a nation, an unshakable resolve, and the burden of 1,000 years of honor. This was not just a uniform, this was a living tableau of a heritage, an honor, and thousands of years of history, with a story of sacrifice hidden in every thread. In that moment, among the crowd, among the tourists, among the journalists, whispers suddenly rose. What will Trump do? Will he try another show? Everyone was in anticipation, accustomed to Trump's provocative and unconventional behavior, knowing his constant desire to draw the spotlight. Little did they know, they were on the verge of witnessing an unforgettable moment, where arrogance would clash with honor, and ostentation with deep value, a moment to be witnessed by history. History was being rewritten that morning at Blackwood Castle, by the hand of an unexpected hero, a silent soldier. Trump, in the focus of all cameras, with a sudden and theatrical gesture, turned to one of the black officers on his protection detail. As if on a theater stage, he calculated every move. In his eyes, there was more than just a simple command, there was a challenge, a contempt, perhaps even a hidden, insidious mockery. It was as if that guard was no different from any other ornament there, an unimportant object that could be easily cast aside, erased from a photograph. Displaying power, belittling others, had always been his style, almost his signature. He raised his hand sharply and pointed, his voice icy, sharp and cold like a bullet, cutting through the air. Time for the shot now. Get that guard out of the frame. What's he doing there anyway? He's no different from a statue. This command was more than a simple request for a photo, it was a display of power, an attempt at domination. An attempt to humiliate, an act of disrespect against the symbol of a country. He spoke as if giving an order to a statue, disregarding the guard's humanity, his duty, his reason for existence. The target was Arthur. Why him? Perhaps his stance, perhaps the silent, defiant gaze beneath his helmet. Or perhaps he simply wanted to test the limits of his power, to see if he could break this seemingly unshakable discipline, to find the weakness of that seemingly invincible guard. But at that moment, all eyes were on Arthur, all breaths awaited his every move. Even the cold air of the castle could not dampen the resolve in his soul. Everyone knew that. Arthur Finch was no ordinary soldier. He was one of the most senior royal guards. Every step, every breath he took, carried the legacy of a 1,000-year tradition. The shadows of the past walked with him. Throughout his years of service, he had not merely worn a uniform. No. He had represented the unshakable honor of his country, the spirit of a 1,000-year tradition, the very essence of sacrifice and discipline. Every day, as he stood before those stones, he felt not only his own existence but also the weight of a nation, of history, on his shoulders. For him, this was more than a duty, it was a sacred trust. A way of life. A mission. His presence was a challenge, silent yet profound, a noisy yet comforting presence. The crowd suddenly froze in silence. All cameras, all whispers, all breaths stopped, as if the world paused for a moment, time itself frozen. To everyone's astonished gaze, Arthur Finch, in that moment resembling a movie scene, broke protocol. This was an incredible step, an unexpected move by anyone. He was a royal guard. Protocol was his blood, his life, it was ingrained in every cell, his reason for being. An unprotocol movement was unthinkable for a guard, it could mean professional suicide, the end of his career. But that moment called for something entirely different. It was an inner voice, a call of honor, the voice of his conscience. He merely requested 60 seconds. His voice, like thunder, echoed in that silence, like a deafening scream, but containing a peace within it. In those moments when the hall held its breath and time stood still, Arthur's voice whispered his unshakable commitment to duty, the true meaning of sacrifice, and how some values could never be compromised. Every word hit Trump's face like a slap, the crowd's heart. These were not just a soldier's words. This was the cry of an honor. The silent scream of a nation. In that moment, a new page was opened in the history of Blackwood Castle, a lesson in respect and discipline was being written. A challenge across ages was taking place, in the most unexpected arena, a duel where words were as sharp as swords. In that moment, it was as if Blackwood Castle itself held its breath, the spirits hidden within each stone revived to witness this unexpected event. The castle's ancient energy intensified with a tense atmosphere, as if even the walls were whispering, greeting this long-awaited moment. Trump's harsh gesture targeted Arthur's soul directly, not his armor, questioning his reason for being, his life's purpose. As Corporal Arthur Finch looked from beneath his helmet, years flashed before his eyes like a film reel. That voice he had heard since childhood, his grandfather's whisper, those words that even entered his dreams, that advice echoing in his heart, honor, my boy. Honor comes before everything. Whatever happens, do not break your stance, because you carry not only yourself but also the burden of a legacy, a nation, a history, a civilization. During his Royal Guard training, that mantra repeated thousands of times every day: discipline, protocol, duty, respect, dignity. Never react. Never show emotion. Be like a statue. Be unshakable. Do not yield to provocations. Always stand tall, always be at your post. And now, this man, this president, was pointing a condescending finger right at the heart of that immense history, that unshakable discipline, that sacred duty. As if this sacred duty meant nothing, as if these guards were just there for the entertainment of tourists, meant to be background in photographs, like worthless figures. This twisted Arthur's insides, creating an indescribable pain in his heart, as if a knife had been plunged into his soul. This was an insult not only to himself but to all his colleagues and the values they represented, a test of humility. Arthur had rehearsed that moment thousands of times in his mind. An unprotocol move? Impossible. A guard would never react, never break his stance. He was expected to remain like an emotionless statue, for this was their oath, their philosophy of existence. Protocol was their identity, a ritual in their blood. But this was not just a protocol violation. This was a stone thrown at the heart of the country, an attack on something sacred. This was a disrespect to the legacy of every soldier, every martyr, every hero who had shed blood for this homeland. Especially recently, those humiliating videos circulating on the internet, those mocking comments from black individuals, the insolence they encountered while on duty outside Blackwood Castle. Arthur heard it echoing in his ears. Look at these soldiers, standing like statues, they're useless. Are you paying them? Even a robot is more useful. They're ridiculous. Even black people don't take them seriously. What do they think they're doing? Those who laughed in mockery, those who tried to distract the guards by waving their hands, those who danced foolishly in front of the guards, even those who dared to spit in a guard's face, those who kicked a guard's foot, those who tried to remove their helmets. The carelessness of every tourist trying to take a selfie, the insolence of every arrogant vlogger, the demeaning attitude of every shouting and mocking person. All of them were trying to empty the essence of this great institution, these sublime values. For them, the guards were just costumed mannequins, historical objects, soulless figures rather than living beings. These attacks opened deep wounds in Arthur's heart, bleeding his soul, but still he stood tall, because his duty commanded it. But that moment was a breaking point. He could no longer remain silent. Arthur vividly recalled a recent incident, the small child in the wheelchair. The guards, against protocol, had shown sincere respect to that tiny heart. That moment was a lesson in humanity beyond even protocol. A display of compassion, a beacon of hope, a bridge of humanity. And what about that soldier, who continued his guard duty without flinching even when his glasses fell? Or those who intervened without hesitation, within military protocol, for their comrade who fainted on duty in the tiring weather? Or the moment a guard's mother saw him in uniform for the first time and burst into tears? That silent gaze between mother and son was heavier than the whole world, a communication beyond words, the purest form of love and pride, a moment worth a lifetime. These were not just soldiers. These were souls who carried honor in every breath, dedicated to duty, hearts devoted to their country. They were silent heroes who maintained their unshakable discipline even in the most difficult moments, standing tall against all provocations from outside. They were the silent guardians of a nation, carrying a sacred legacy on their shoulders, preserving a trust to be passed on to future generations. And this legacy had to be defended against all disrespect, whatever the cost. The black security officer on Trump's protection detail had bowed his head. Were his eyes avoiding? Was he ashamed? Perhaps. Or was he just a puppet obeying orders, a figure whose will had been taken away? Arthur's eyes lingered on that officer for a brief moment. He knew that sometimes people easily label and judge what they don't know, what they don't understand. Especially black people could harbor a kind of prejudice against white institutions, feeling excluded, scorned, carrying a legacy full of bitter experiences from the past. In their eyes, these guards were just representatives of a white tradition, pawns of an oppressive system. Yet, many like Arthur wore this uniform, regardless of their skin color, as a badge of honor. This was the honor of a nation, of a history, not of a race. Arthur felt, at that moment, that this misunderstanding, this prejudice, also had to end. This whisper within him was what propelled him to act. It was a voice from his heart. It was no longer time to be silent. The end of silence had come. So, if you were in Arthur's place, what would you have done in this situation? How would you deal with such prejudices and disrespect, and how would you defend human dignity? When have you witnessed true strength, and what kind of difficulties did this strength help you overcome? How should different cultures be approached, and how can we discover the true meaning behind such institutions, the deep heritage they carry? How is a nation's honor protected by the actions of individuals, and what can be the impact of these actions on society? Share your thoughts, feelings, and experiences in the comments. Each comment will further enrich this deep discussion. Arthur Finch's request for 60 seconds hung in the air, each word echoing through the hall's walls, growing in power as it reverberated, spreading like a wave. The vast hall of the palace suddenly transformed into a sea of whispers, each whisper carrying the increasing pulse of tension, like a heartbeat, the common pulse of the entire hall. The air was charged with electricity, as if an explosion could occur at any moment, the tension at its peak. The king could not conceal his astonishment, on his face, an expression of deep wonder, unaccustomed to such a brazen disregard of protocols, his eyes fixed on Arthur. His eyes gazed at Arthur with admiration, as if there was a treasure, a fountain of wisdom, waiting to be discovered within this young soldier. The security officers looked at each other, not knowing what to do. Each felt the tension to their core, ready for intervention at any moment, but no one could move, as if an invisible force held them back. This was against protocol. This was an unprecedented situation. Yet, Arthur's stance, his voice, his determination, and that unshakable expression in his eyes were so powerful that no one dared to object, no one dared to stop him or interrupt him. Perhaps deep down, everyone thought that this display of arrogance, this disrespect, this racial prejudice deserved a retort. This sentiment was also present in the crowd. Everyone silently awaited justice to be served, honor to be restored, a lesson to be taught. Arthur slowly, yet resolutely, removed his helmet. This was a rare act for a guard, fully exposing his face, opening himself up to the world, revealing a heart and soul. His short, thick hair was damp with sweat, Despite the cold air, fine beads of sweat trickled down his forehead, revealing his humanity, showing that he was not just a robot but a living, breathing human being with emotions and a will. His eyes scanned the entire hall, the entire world, as if piercing the soul of each individual, like a prophet delivering a sermon. First, he looked at the king, with deep respect, devotion, surrender, and an oath in his eyes. Then at Trump, with neither anger nor fear in his gaze, only unshakable determination and deep seriousness, like a challenge of wisdom. Then, he looked at the silent crowd, the cameras, the whole world, as if whispering to the future. His voice, at first like a whisper, gradually grew stronger, reaching the farthest corner of the hall, each word like a sledgehammer, etched into minds. It was as if every word found its echo in the ancient stones of the castle, vibrating all the walls, permeating souls. This was an address, a sermon, a lesson, a note for history. For years, I have worn this uniform, he began, his voice trembling but resolute, each word seemingly torn from his heart, dripping from his soul. Every morning when I don this helmet, I remember that I represent not just myself, but a nation, a culture, a tradition. Beneath this helmet, there is not just a face, but thousands of years of history. There are the spirits of my ancestors, each of whom sacrificed their lives for their homeland, each of whom protected the honor of these lands. This uniform teaches us respect, discipline, dedication to duty, and most importantly, humility. For true strength lies not in ostentation, but in essence, not in noise, but in silence. Our duty is a sacred oath, performed not only with our bodies but also with our souls. This oath flows in our blood, in our spirit. Trump's calculated smile slowly faded, replaced by surprise, perhaps even a hint of fear, his pupils widening. In his gaze, for the first time, a sign of astonishment, perhaps even discomfort, appeared. It was as if the statue before him had spoken, and this disturbed him, disrupted his plans, ruined his entire staged scene. Arthur continued, his voice now thundering, each word a slap, creating an electrification in the air, completely changing the atmosphere of the hall, the tension increasing with every breath. Mr. President, you may measure power by money, fame, position. You may believe that power lies in belittling others, in erasing them from your photograph. But for us, true power lies in our silent stance, in our unshakable discipline, and most importantly, in our commitment to the values we represent. To see us as mere statues, without understanding the spirit beneath this uniform, is not only disrespectful to you, but to the greatness of this country and its values. We are on duty not only with our bodies but also with our souls. Our stance is the honor of a nation, the pride of a civilization. A sob was heard in the crowd, then another, and then dozens, the sobs turning into a chorus. Many could not hold back their tears. An emotional moment was taking place. The hall had become a place of emotional release. The young woman's flirtatious approach to the royal guard and the soldier's impassive response. The small child blocking the soldier's path during the changing of the guard and the soldier's kind, superhuman response to him. The vlogger's audacious entry into the forbidden area and the stern warning he received. The soldier's unwavering discipline even when his foot slipped and his hat fell. Arthur's words were like a thread connecting all these events, revealing the deep meaning behind each incident, opening new doors in minds. Discipline was not just about following rules. Discipline was about standing by one's values even in the most difficult moments. This was a belief, a philosophy of life. The soul of a nation. A symbol of human dignity. An unshakable stance, a call. This guard, whom you said get out of the frame, is not just a soldier, Arthur said, his voice now like a sermon, each word piercing the soul of the crowd, stirring consciences, tears streaming down faces. He is the honor of this nation. Every day, he stands tall, a silent hero, against disrespect, mockery, prejudice, especially those hurtful, condescending looks and verbal attacks, racist insults we sometimes endure from black individuals. Perhaps we don't speak, but with our stance, with our presence, we teach you a lesson. True strength is not in humiliating others, but in rising with your own values. And these values are far nobler than skin color, position, or money. Honor can never be negotiated, never trampled upon, never sold. Our stance is not a challenge to you, but a reminder. A warning. A lesson. A call to humanity. These words of Arthur were a silent cry, a call, a touch to the hearts and consciences of people, shaking them deeply. In that moment, one of history's greatest lessons was being taught, a silent rebellion, with a dignified stance. Arthur's words, like a sword, descended into the center of the hall, sharply cleaving the air in two, shattering all silence, their echo lingering on the walls. Trump's calculated expression had completely vanished, replaced by an incomprehensible astonishment, perhaps even a touch of shame. On the faces of the crowd, a mixture of astonishment, admiration, and deep respect appeared. Some wanted to applaud silently, while others were simply captivated by the magic of the moment, frozen, unable even to breathe. Everyone filling the hall held their breath, absorbing every word, feeling this historic moment to their very core. When Arthur finished speaking, he slowly put his helmet back on, concealing his momentary vulnerability, as if donning armor, returning to his former unshakable posture. And then, just as before, he returned to his rigid, statue-like stance, ready to continue his duty, with unshakable determination. Only that brief moment, those 60 seconds, were worth a lifetime. They contained lessons of a lifetime, a philosophy of life, like a gift offered to humanity. Trump, after a moment of hesitation, turned to his bodyguards. This time, there was no calculated smile on his face, nor an arrogant expression. Only a silent acceptance, perhaps a little shame and deep thought. In his eyes, for the first time, a glimmer of understanding appeared, as if he had experienced an epiphany. Without saying a word, he nodded slightly and exited through the castle gates. Like a shadow, he quietly departed. The impact he left behind would be permanent, unforgettable, etched into history. The silence he left behind was filled with the echo of Arthur's words, each word vibrating in every corner of the hall, leaving an eternal reverberation. In that moment, a battle had been won. A spiritual battle won unarmed, without struggle, only with honor and values, with human dignity. This was a war fought silently, honorably, against one of the world's greatest powers, a lesson for the whole world. It was a heroic epic, a lesson in wisdom. This story isn't just about a royal guard's brave stance. It's the story of everyone around the world who silently fights against injustice, prejudice, and disrespect. The tourist girl trying to break discipline with a laugh, the child blocking the soldier's path during the changing of the guard, and the soldier's kind, superhuman response to him. The vlogger's audacious entry into the forbidden area and the stern warning he received. The soldier's unwavering discipline even when his foot slipped and his hat fell. All these were ordinary challenges these heroes faced, trials of daily life. But in each, the guards never compromised their honorable stance. Remember the moment the guard's mother saw him in uniform for the first time. An elderly woman standing among the tourist crowd saw her son during the changing of the guard. A silent gaze, tears in her eyes, and a historic moment. Tears streamed down her face, because for a mother to see her son's dedication to this sacred duty was an indescribable pride, a heartwarming moment. This was not just a meeting of a mother and son, this was the pride of a nation for its child's dedication to this sacred duty. It was a silent celebration of honor and love, a whisper of pride rising from the heart of a nation, a wave of warmth encompassing the entire world. Remember, the soldier who continued his guard duty even when his glasses fell, or those who intervened even within protocol for their comrade who fainted on duty. These may seem like minor incidents, but each one whispers to us what true strength is. True strength lies not in muscles or position, but in an unshakable commitment to one's values, beliefs, and duty. And this commitment crushes all prejudice, all disrespect, especially those hurtful, condescending attitudes and insults, the dismissals that sometimes come from black individuals. For honor and discipline are above all races, all colors, all beliefs. They are a universal language, the common heritage of humanity. These values are the fundamental pillars that uphold a society, forming the mortar of a civilization. On that November morning at Blackwood Castle, amidst the cold winds, Corporal Arthur Finch's voice penetrated the deepest parts of the castle, etched into the cells of every stone, destined to remain there forever, to withstand the test of time, unforgettable. This was not just the voice of a soldier, it was the voice of honor, duty, and unshakable discipline. That moment immortalized not Trump's arrogance, but Arthur's grace and strength. It showed how a momentary disrespect was met with an unforgettable lesson. This event would be written in gold letters on the pages of history, passed down as a legacy to future generations, circulated by word of mouth, narrated like a legend. Such stories teach us that we must understand before we judge. They show us the cost of arrogance and how prejudice can mislead us. The Royal Guards are not just symbols of British tradition, but also living embodiments of universal values, respect, and sacrifice. They, with their silent stance, cry out to the world what true strength is. Especially recently, those humiliating videos circulating on the internet, those mocking comments from black individuals, all sorts of condescension aimed at the guards, actually prove once again how important this institution is. Arthur's story became a shield against such attacks, a symbol of resistance. He showed us that a uniform is not just a piece of cloth, but a deep meaning and sacred heritage beneath it. This heritage belongs to all humanity, regardless of race, language, or religion. It is a common value and a treasure that must be preserved, passed down from generation to generation. Because the future of humanity depends on these values, it is essential for the continuity of civilization. These values form the foundation of a civilization, strengthen the social fabric, and hold humanity together. That day, President Trump's arrogance was met with a lesson. A lesson that echoed not only to him but to the entire world. Respect is not earned by title, discipline is built not by power, but by an inner dedication, and honor is preserved not by external attacks, but by adhering tightly to one's own values. This was not just a momentary event but a lesson to be passed down through generations. A reminder, a warning, an enlightenment. True nobility lies not in outward appearance or position, but in the depths of the soul, in unshakable commitment to values. This is one of the most important lessons in human history. Arthur Finch's epic stance was not merely about protocol, it was the resistance of the human spirit, the voice of conscience. It showed how figures often marginalized, misunderstood, or disparaged worldwide can actually possess immense strength and virtue. That moment was an example of how an individual, in front of the crowd, can stand by their truths, beliefs, and values despite all pressures. He became a symbol of silent yet powerful resistance, unshakable honor, and human dignity. His story will continue to inspire and guide anyone facing such challenges, shining like a lighthouse. Future generations will draw inspiration from Arthur Finch's stance, remembering his story as they fight their own battles for honor. On that November morning at Blackwood Castle, amidst the cold winds, Corporal Arthur Finch's voice penetrated the deepest parts of the castle, etched into the cells of every stone, destined to remain there forever, to withstand the test of time, unforgettable. This was not just the voice of a soldier, it was the voice of honor, duty, and unshakable discipline, a cry from the conscience of humanity. That moment immortalized not Trump's arrogance, but Arthur's grace and strength. It showed how a momentary disrespect was met with an unforgettable lesson. Now, Blackwood Castle was not just a historical structure, but also a symbol where the roar of honor and respect echoed, telling of humanity's universal values, like a monument, like a temple. Such stories teach us that we must understand before we judge. They show us the cost of arrogance and how prejudice can mislead us. The Royal Guards are not just symbols of British tradition, but also living embodiments of universal values, respect, and sacrifice. They, with their silent stance, cry out to the world what true strength is. Especially recently, those humiliating videos circulating on the internet, those mocking comments from black individuals, all sorts of condescension aimed at the guards, actually prove once again how important this institution is. Arthur's story became a shield against such attacks, a symbol of resistance. He showed us that a uniform is not just a piece of cloth, but a deep meaning and sacred heritage beneath it. This heritage belongs to all humanity, regardless of race, language, or religion. It is a common value and a treasure that must be preserved, passed down from generation to generation. Because the future of humanity depends on these values, the continuity of civilization is essential. These values form the foundation of a civilization, strengthen the social fabric, and hold humanity together. This story also proves that sometimes the greatest lessons come at the most unexpected moments and from the most seemingly ordinary figures. Arthur Finch stood beneath his helmet as a silent hero, yet his words captured the attention of the entire world and created an impact that will not be forgotten for centuries. His stance was more than just a military protocol, it was a symbol of human dignity. Such events remain in our collective memory and remind us who we are, what we believe in, and what kind of world we want. These stories can serve as a guide in hazy times, a beacon of hope. They are the lessons of the past, the guides for the future. This historic moment will not remain just a single day's event. It will be a lesson, a legacy, a whisper passed down to future generations. It will tell them that true strength lies not in external ostentation, but in internal discipline, respect, and unshakable honor. And perhaps, one day, everyone will understand that a guard's silent stance can be more effective than the loudest words. This is not just a video script, but a message, a call. Respect is the key to everything. Honor can never be sold. And true heroes are sometimes hidden behind the most silent stances, the most humble actions. Human dignity must always be protected, under all circumstances.